It's, Thank you very much. I really appreciate the introduction and the warm welcome. So I'm very happy to be here on behalf of Native Plant Trust. If you've ever visited Garden in the Woods, it's a native plant, basically a native plant landscape of just a lot of cool native plants that we showcase in our garden. We also own like 6 or 7 sanctuaries throughout New England that I'm the coordinator of, stewardship-wise, rare plant management and rare plant monitoring. I also sit in on some of the invasive plant management councils in Massachusetts, which I will talk about here, but I have a lot of slides, so I'm going to try to get through as much as I can here, and then hopefully have some questions as well. So let's begin. My talk is Ecology Identification of Invasive and Early Detection Plants in Massachusetts. A little bit more focus on Cape Cod, but a lot of these invasive plants are basically all over Massachusetts. But some of these are kind of just starting to become actually detectable on the landscape. So I'll talk about these as well. So first of all, I mean, this is pretty basic, so hopefully people know what an invasive plant is, but if you don't, these are some of the criteria that we use when we're assessing invasive plants. One of them is they have to be non-native to New England. That's pretty gray in some instances, because what is native, right? Is it native before European settlement? How long does it have to be here? But for what we're talking about non-native to New England. We're talking about plants that were here after European settlement, that arrived here by artificial means. Spreads rapidly and aggressively. I'm also going to try not to be so doom and gloom today because invasive plants and ecology can be very depressing. So I'm going to try not to depress you too much, but because I'm going to try to end on a good note with like native plants, trying to some pretty pictures maybe. So, but bear with me. There's going to be some depressing stuff going on. But these species spread rapidly and aggressively. So they're out of their range. They're out of their native range. Their native range is usually somewhere in Europe or Asia. So they're out of their range. They don't have competitors. So they spread rapidly and aggressively throughout the landscape. They can displace native flora. And they naturalize and persist. Now, there are certain non-natives that you'll have in your garden or something that will potentially grow, but they won't, and if they escape, they won't persist in the natural landscape. These actually do. I'm part of MIPAG, and if you've heard of MIPAG, it's the Massachusetts Invasive Plant Advisory Group. So we're made up of a bunch of conservation scientists from towns, state organizations, nonprofits, even the nursery industry is actually represented with MIPAG. So we all come together and we basically assess what species are most threatening to Massachusetts. So all throughout Massachusetts, all the way from western Massachusetts all the way to the islands. So we have assessed all these species, and then they actually get recommended from us to MDAR, and MDAR lists these and prohibits them from being in the nursery trade and other instances of being sold, and also being in the management for restoration. So these are ones that we actually have voted on and assessed. There's a bunch of them here. So just a little bit. 36 invasive species at this point. Some of them way long ago, like the ones that were, the usual ones that I'm going to talk about today. And I could go on for 3 days, probably talking about the number of invasive species and talking about the ecology. You don't want to be here that long, believe me. But today I'm just going to talk about some of the worst ones. But some of these, you're talking about tree of heaven, garlic mustard, buckthorn, alder. Those are what we assessed as being invasive. They're present on the landscape. They are actively going and doing harm to natural communities and displacing native flora. 34 likely invasive. Now there's not a lot of, these are categories that we run through a set of criteria. So a bunch of questions that are answered, and a lot of information and data from other states that we have to assess these species. So some of them will come up as invasive, some of them come up as likely invasive. Likely means you don't have quite as much data as the ones that come up invasive. So porcelain berry and narrow-leaf bittercress are some of the likely invasive ones. And some of the newer ones we just assessed, like wall lettuce, which you may or may not have heard of. Potentially invasive. These are ones we don't know that much about. These are species that may come into the landscape more as time goes on, as climate change starts to happen, as we get warmer, these species start to spread up from the south, or we think they might be invasive, so we really want to take pro-action for them. And there's certain species that just don't meet. We run through the whole criteria, the whole questions, they just don't come up quite invasive, like northern catalpa, which is a non-native species, but it just doesn't come up as invasive, so we're still working on some of those. So some of these criteria, we've already run through this a little bit. The species that we run through have to be non-indigenous, which means they are native to somewhere else. They have to be naturalized, which means there's populations that are actually persisting out there. They have rapid and widespread distribution, so they occur and they basically reproduce pretty rapidly and displace native flora, which is down here also, have the ability to outcompete other plant species. So there has been literally, you can see that on the landscape. They have the potential to exist in high numbers and naturally. Minimally managed. What does that even mean? What does minimally managed mean? Well, if you look around people's yards, they get mowed a lot, so that's managed heavily. The less managed they are, the more likely that is what we want to know about. We want to know that these species persist and minimally managed, whereas the landscape does not get managed for numbers of years. Numbers occurrences of numerous individuals forming dense stands. That's sometimes a problem as well, where species can just get overwhelming. You see like a whole wetland of Phragmites or a whole wetland of purple loosestrife. That's dense stands that are basically out-competing everything else in the landscape. And then finally, at the very bottom there, this is something we're just starting to look at. There's a group called RISC, which I will talk about a little bit, that actually is looking at species from other states, non-native species from other states that might be present in Massachusetts and New England at some point in the future. So these are species that are invasive now in maybe New Jersey or Virginia. And as climate change moves, as we get warmer, these species may actually come up here. So that's just I have a lot of slides, so I'm not going to really read that, but it's a definition of what a non-native invasive plant is. And as you can see, it says it can cause economic, environmental harm and potentially harm to human health in some species like like giant hogweed can be very, very abrasive to your skin. So there's certain species that can actually be that way as well. They are capable of moving aggressively into an area, monopolizing light. You know how invasive species and non-natives will actually come out before the natives in the spring and summer? They get that that early start, which is good for them anyway. So that's Japanese knotweed. We're going to go through species like this one. This is garlic mustard. This may occur on Cape Cod. It's very prominent, especially in rich northern hardwoods, but it does occur on Cape Cod as well. And this species prefers these moist shaded areas. It also grows well on roadsides, wood edges, trails, forest openings. It's pretty evident. It's also shade tolerant, which is a really scary thing. It can take over an understory of a woods. So it's one of the few invasive plants that can actually be very dominant in the understory. It's also a spring ephemeral, and it's biennial, which means it's already out, probably. It's starting to come up. It's gonna flower really early. And if you've been cooped up inside all year, all winter, and you want to do an invasive plant project, this is an easy one because they're easy to pull. And people like to do that because it's early spring. It's an early spring thing, so it's good. It's a good. This plant is pretty popular for invasive plant management in early May and April, May, and June. The thing is, for that species, you want to get that species before it flowers and seeds. After it seeds, you might as well not do it, because it seeds and it will reproduce, and you basically need to start over. So please get that one. Before that, this is bishop's goutweed. This is one people grow in their gardens in the past. I don't know, people, I already see some shaking heads on that one. People don't like that one because it will take over your garden for sure. It is a perennial herb that does escape from your garden. It does escape into natural landscapes as well. We have populations of this species in 2 of our sanctuaries. One in way northern New Hampshire at Hobbs Sanctuary near Littleton, and we have another one in Plainfield Sanctuary and near Dartmouth, so next to the river. Yes, we've been kind of ignoring it, which is not a good thing. We have other things to worry about, but things are starting to the point where we don't want to ignore this one anymore because it's starting to spread even further. So there's a variegated form and a non-variegated form. Apparently the non-variegated form is not quite as invasive as the non-variegated form. So, but it is very difficult to remove. It likes floodplains. It can handle the wet, some moist conditions. It occurs in disturbed areas mostly, but it will move right into the natural landscape as well. And it's very difficult to remove after it's established. It pretty much spreads primarily by vegetative means. So, and it can be very aggressive. This is one that you may have seen on the Cape and in the islands. This is a species that we recently assessed for MyPags. So this one's Scotch broom, Cytisus scoparius. This is a species that has been pretty popular at some point in the nursery trade on the islands. So I know when I lived on the vineyard, I had one in the garden, so in our yard as well. So this species is a non-native shrub to Europe. Spreads quickly. It will, because look at those seeds. It's in the Fabaceae family. So It, they have these seeds that disperse pretty explosively, and they carry with wind. So this species really can spread pretty quickly, and it was planted mostly just due to stabilizing sand dunes back in the day in the 1800s. So that's why it came, and that's why it continued to spread. So in the last couple of years, MyPAC has listed this species as likely invasive. This is due to a lot of data that we have from the islands, Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, where they're threatening the globally rare sandplain grasslands that occur there, and on the Cape as well. So this is a species that we decided to list because of that, and that they may be displacing rare plant flora. We are very concerned about that, and now it is listed in MyPAC. Japanese barberry, probably not nobody's favorite, right? Has these barbs here. It grows in open fields, thickets, woodlands, forests. It can take over. This is a scene, I think, in Pennsylvania, where it is pretty much impenetrable. You don't want to walk through that. Definitely not. So it is also canopy shade. It likes canopy shade, so it's shade tolerant. It has these spoon-shaped leaves with entire margins, has one single spine at the leaf nodes, and you'll feel it if you try to pull it up. So that's not good. Has these really cool, really nice yellow flowers, and it does turn bright red in the fall. So it's it used to be pretty popular. It's also still popular with landscaping. Around some of the fast food restaurants, stuff like that. People love to plant in the landscape, especially the dark maroon part of it. Dark maroon, very of it. So this species it's much more common even in rich areas, rich forests, where there's a lot more nutrients available. So this species definitely occurs there. And one study showed that it also harbors deer ticks, more relevant than other species. So what happens is it gets really thick in the understory, and it creates this microenvironment where the ticks are, it's actually warmer for them and more humid. So the deer ticks don't have to go in the ground at night, and they're able to reproduce and do more. So it's like, it's definitely a double-edged sword with this one. You don't want to walk through it for barb reasons. You don't want to walk through it for deer ticks. So there's a relative that used to be more common on the landscape. This is kind of a ironic name. Common barberry is not common anymore in New England. This is Barbarius vulgaris. The reason for that is it became a host plant for the wheat rust fungus. And it basically got eradicated. A lot of the populations got eradicated. So this one used to be more common than actually Japanese barberry, but that is not even close now. It is a lot less common. Still present. I see it every once in a while, but I don't see it as common as Japanese. Sea of purple, so pretty, right? Such a beautiful landscape. No, this is purple. This is purple loosestrife, and it can take over a wetland. This one has been notorious in a lot of marshes and wet meadows all throughout New England, especially in Massachusetts. Eastern Massachusetts has had a lot of trouble with this species. So it occurs in anywhere there's shallow water, basically on landscapes. This species, if there's one species that has, let's go back. If there's one species that has declined just a bit in New England, this one might be it, because of the Gallericella beetles that have been introduced. It's a biocontrol. It has been very effective where they do occur. I think this is Foul Meadow, I think in Canton. This was years ago. If you look at it now, purple loosestrife is there, but it's not very prevalent. It's a lot less common. So it still pops up where there's not Garicella beetles, so you will still see it a lot. But you just won't see it in areas that where the beetles have been released. No introduction needed for this one. This is Falopia japonica. It's changed names over the years. It used to be Polygonum cuspidatum. Then it was Falopia japonica. Then it was Renutria for a bit, and now it's back to Falopia. Whatever it is, it's a horrible species that can take over a floodplain. It can take over islands, can take over any areas where there's riparian zones. This is, of course, Japanese knotweed, and it thrives in some of these riparian areas and wetlands. I don't know how common it is here, but it's pretty, yeah, it can occur here. It also can hybridize with giant knotweed, which is another species of knotweed, which is just as invasive. And apparently some of the populations in Massachusetts are the hybrids itself. They are hybrids of this giant knotweed and Japanese knotweed, which makes things just worse, I think, in some ways. So it does like sunlight, but it can tolerate moderate shade as well. Once it becomes established, it's almost impossible to get rid of without just headache after headache. And I'll talk about more how to do that later. Phragmites is sort of a similar situation where you'll see this one on the sides of the roads a lot, in marshes and wetlands and ditches. Just will absolutely destroy a wetland. Actually outcompetes purple loosestrife as well. So, and it can be very tall, as you can see. It can be up to 10 to 12 feet tall. So it does like to grow best in freshwater, but even around here in some of these, brackish areas, it will occur as well. So very common. There's a native Phragmites, believe it or not, that occurs sometimes even with the non-native one. So this is something you have to pay attention to. Even though the native one is not that common on the landscape, it's actually pretty rare in some instances. But you still have to look at it and see how it goes, because early in the season they look almost exactly alike. But as the season goes on, the stem for the native one, if I had a pointer, becomes a little more red, crimson-like. So that's how you can tell apart. You can even further, if you take a stem, you can look at the ligule, and the native one has a really wide ligule, where the non-native has a much more narrow one. But that's how you can tell them apart. Even the experts have had trouble telling these two apart at some point. The native one does not act invasive, so it will probably not be just taking over a wetland. It'll just be individuals of that species around. So that's a good indication. If you see a Phragmites, just a few individuals, it could be the native one. So watch out. Don't pull it up. Not my favorite, probably one of my least favorites. I don't know how glossy buckthorn is around here, but Frangula honus is devastating areas in Metro West Boston. It occurs in a lot of different types of habitats, and that's what makes it so destructive. It occurs in uplands. It occurs near around wetlands as well. So it can tolerate certain swamps as long as it's not too deep a water. It can handle that. So it's okay with moist soils, fens, edges of bogs, upland habitats, fence rows, old fields, you name it. It, it reproduces fast with these berries. The birds carry it. I love birds. I always used to be a bird person, but they do carry these fruits, and it definitely spreads a lot. We have done a management project for this species in Concord for about 10, 12 years. Still, after all this time, still trying to control this species for a rare plant, trying to protect a rare violet that occurs in Concord, Mass. So I probably have nightmares about this one. Probably. Lonicera moroi. This is what we call one of the bush honeysuckles. This is Lonicera morii. There's 3 or 4 species of these. There's also Japanese honeysuckle, which is the more of a vine. But these are the shrub honeysuckles. Japanese honeysuckle does occur more down this way than it does further up. So that one is a problem. But the shrub honeysuckles, to me, are even worse in a lot of places. They will take over a lot of different types of habitats, a lot of variety of habitats, fields and open forests. It likes a little more moist soils, but it's okay with the sandy soils sometimes on the Cape as well. So you will probably have this species occur there, especially in calcareous areas as well. Calcareous is like where the limestone, where the pH is high compared to acidic, which is not common in Massachusetts, obviously, but it does occur more commonly here. There's 3 or 4 species, but they all act the same. You know, they're all the same species. They're sometimes very difficult to tell apart. They've all been listed by MyPag, but they're basically the same ecologically. So it doesn't matter which species it is. The only thing to note is there are native honeysuckles, and native honeysuckles have a solid stem. So if you cut the stem, they have a solid pith, whereas the non-native ones have a little hole. They're very hollow in the pith. So that's the difference between how to tell the difference between a native and a non-native honeysuckle. Okay, I'll just skip this one. Everybody knows about this already, right? American bitter or Asian bittersweet, the berries, of course. It's a really destructive vine. It will just really, really, really choke out trees. It'll do its best to choke out a tree. So it mostly occurs in disturbed woodlands and fields, but also even in salt marshes, believe it or not, the species can occur there. Fence rows, birds will disperse the seeds. People used to use it, and I don't know, they probably still do for holiday decorations, potentially. So it will grow over pretty much anything, and you know, it's a tough one to combat as well. The little ones are easy to pull, but you have to find the big ones. Anyway, so there is. I was gonna talk about the leaf shape. See how it's round and with the teeth. Now there's an American bittersweet. There's always something, right? This is a native bittersweet. It's also rare on the landscape, so you're not going to see it very often. So the leaf is a lot more elongated. It also has flowers on the terminal ends of the stems. So whereas the other ones has more on the nodes. So that's the difference between those two. This one's pretty rare, so you're not going to see it very much, but they can look quite much similar to each other. So just be on the lookout. If you see a bittersweet, just kind of keep in the back of your mind that you could be pulling an American bittersweet without knowing it. But most of the time, 9 times out of 10, you're going to find that it's going to be the Asian bittersweet. Black swallowwort, I'm not sure how common this species is on the Cape. It has really wreaked havoc on a lot of different areas in Massachusetts, in a lot of disturbed areas, right-of-ways, woodlands, fields, floodplains, urban areas. It has these, there's two species. One of them has these maroon flowers. The other one has these pale flowers, which is called pale swallowwort. It actually was the first recorded collection was from Ipswich, Mass. So, in North Shore in 1854. So the problem with this species, as we know, the monarchs are in global decline. It's actually a candidate for federal listing. So this species, this black swallowwort, is in the milkweed family. So the larvae for monarchs will lay their eggs on this species, on these two species, but they will not survive because it doesn't provide any nutritional value for the species. So that's why that's why I included these species, because they're very detrimental to the monarchs. Burning bush, very popular landscape tree, garden tree, shrub that has been used a lot. And you can see why. Look what it looks like in the fall. That's really beautiful, right? It looks great. Um, but let me tell you, it can be pretty bad on the landscape. It grows well in dry, sandy soils. We actually have, if you know Garden in the Woods in Framingham, we have private property owners next to us. One of them has a 25-foot tree, and it spreads onto our property. And we've been trying to work with them over the years, but it hasn't really worked too well to try to help them or try to see if they might be able to control this or not, or cut it down. Hasn't happened yet, but we're still working on that. So we're having to control the species on our property because there's just little ones that pop up all the time. So this is a species that will just spread as much as you can. Euonymus is a lot of there's a lot of species of Euonymus, and most of them are non-native. So there's a couple other non-native ones that are invasive as well. So the way you can tell this one, look at the winged stems. That's a very easy way to tell. Even without leaves, it's a pretty simple identification for this species. So now I'm just going to quickly go through a couple of the early detection species. I know we're probably running shorter on time because I just keep talking, but the early detection species are pretty important because the ones I just talked about, they occur pretty much, they're established. They're well established all over the place. We're probably never going to eradicate every single one of them. What we want to do now is try to figure out, well, how can we prevent the next real establishment of invasive plants? And how do we do this? And how do we go about this? And we have social media. So there's a lot of ways to try to actually report invasive species coming onto the landscape. We have a lot of naturalists out there using iNaturalist that can report early detection species, and they can go out and do some management. So that's the reason why this is very important, is looking at early detection species. So these have the potential to become invasive. We've seen them in the south of here or west of here. They have the potential to come here. They're already invasive in a lot of ways. Porcelain berry is one species that's not really early detection anymore. It's getting less early detection. So we want rapid response. We want people to go out and manage and eliminate these species from the region before they get to be a buckthorn or Phragmites or something like that. So we want to take this proactive approach, and this group called RISC, Regional Invasive Species and Climate Change, is actually doing that. they're modeling. They're doing a lot of landscape modeling from species that don't occur yet in New England, that occur in the West Coast or the South, that might be somehow spreading this way in one way or another. And we know that even species from the West and South can get here pretty easily based on people traveling and everything. And we know how invasive species travel and how they spread from one place to another. So one is this Lespedeza cuneata. This is a species that I saw on Martha's Vineyard a couple years ago. It's starting to spread in a lot of areas on the vineyard, and I've heard that it is also spreading on the Cape and Nantucket as well. So this is one species to look out for. There's a lot of native Lespedezas and a lot of native Lespedezas that actually occur in sandplain grasslands that are native, but this one looks different than some of the native ones. So this is kind of an upright semi-wood forb. It loves open areas and outcompetes all the sandplain. That's why it's such a threat to these globally rare sandplain grassland areas. So it has a lot of, the seed bank is ridiculous. So it can actually can remain for like 10, 12 years, the seed bank for the species. So it's currently spreading. We are starting to review it. So we haven't even deemed it as invasive yet. So this is how early it is. And we're now under review. As much as we can, we have a lot of people. We have a lot of stuff to do, and ecologists and botanists that are trying to review and assess these species have a lot more duties on their jobs. So it's like all these are volunteer stuff to do. We have to do. So it's like we still trying to get two or three species a year assessed. This one is currently being assessed. Japanese Angelica tree. This is a pretty thorny looking tree. So this one has occurred more in eastern Massachusetts, but not southern Massachusetts. But just be on the lookout for it. It's a deciduous thicket forming tree. Has really, it's an Aurelia, and there's some native Aurelias as well. So this one, though, is very highly threatening to some of the natural communities around in Massachusetts. We have these is risk models. This is kind of hard to see from where you are, but the orange, where the blue and the light blue is where they currently occur, and the orange is where it's predicted to occur. So it's like a model. It's modeling. And as you can see, this species is predicted to really take over in some way as climate changes and everything. So this is Japanese Angelica tree. Another euonymus, which I just mentioned, I'm not gonna go over this one very much, but it's just another euonymus. We talked about burning bush earlier. This is just one to be. This is a vine, not a shrub. But it is in the same genus and one to be on the lookout for on a landscape. And there's your model for that one. It's pretty prevalent in Massachusetts, and it is like, phew, it's all over the place. Mile a minute. That's not a very good common name, right? I mean, that's a very ominous common name for an invasive plant. This one's not really early detection anymore. You're talking this species is starting to really take hold in some places. Luckily, we've gotten some of the populations under control for mile a minute. It used to be in Pennsylvania a long time ago. It's still very, very prevalent there. But it doesn't quite live up to its name of mile a minute, but it can grow up to 6 inches of growth per day. This species is extremely fast growing. And it can, it's crazy. Yeah, it's a crazy species. It has these triangular, distinctly triangular arrowhead-shaped leaves, very vibrant green. They have these barbs as well, so it's not fun to actually manage as well. So it has expanded about 300 miles since the late 1800s or 1930s. Sorry. And there's some of the populations that we know of. This was like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. As you can see, there's quite a bit. Even in Barnstable, there's on the Cape, on the Vineyard, Nantucket, southern Massachusetts, not as many as you get towards the west. But now there's probably about twice as much as this point. So we're trying to, and I don't even want to look at the model because it just shows everywhere in New England. So I don't want this species all over New England. So we want to try to, we really want to concentrate on this species and try to keep it from spreading everywhere. Um, so porcelain berry is another potential one that's kind of starting to spread a little bit, like, and it occurs in some of the same areas as mild minute. Has these really like Easter egg like color berries that it is in the grape family. If it looks like a grape, it is in that family. But there are native wild grapes. These are not edible. These berries are not edible. There's a couple leaf forms that look like that. Um, let's go back. So the question is, how do you tell them apart? Horseberry has this pith that's white. Grape has this pith that's more brown. Stem pith. So it also the porcelain has these lenticels as well, and you know how the grape bark can peel. It's very peely. Porcelain does not. There are all the grape species that I know of. There are probably some exceptions, but most of them are native in New England. So now we're going to look at quickly some methods of control. How do we get rid of what we just talked about? Well, not as easy as you might think, but there's a lot of different methods we can use. Manual, mechanical, chemical, the controversial chemical control, biological, which we already talked about, as Galaricella beetles and purple loosestrife, livestock, even sheep, goats, can get rid of it. Of course, they don't really, they'll get rid of anything, so they don't know the difference between invasive and native. So you just have to watch that. And fire. Some fire. There's been a lot of prescribed fire on the Cape and the islands. This helps a lot of times with native growth establishment. So that also helps sometimes control the invasives as well. And once again, I already talked about the garlic mustard. See how happy she is pulling the garlic mustard in May. So that's something to be, you know, you're controlling the species, you're getting outside. So it's a good one to control. It's a good one for volunteers because you don't need a lot of training to do it, and also ID. This is another one. This is Japanese stiltgrass, which I didn't cover, but Japanese stiltgrass is another invasive that's really starting to create a lot of havoc. This is a species in Sherburne, Massachusetts, which is south of Natick, Massachusetts. This species, I've seen it exactly where this is, and it's really becoming a big problem. So you can pull it. You can pull it by hand, mostly in August for this species. Mechanical, so you can dig up. That's another way. 10 minutes. Woody stems under 1 inch or in diameter can be pulled by hand, but some species can also be dug in limited quantities. The shovel can be used, but shovels usually sometimes can sever the root, and it's really difficult to get the root all the way out. So a digging tool usually helps. So cutting and mowing. A lot of people ask me, like, is it Is it how is it good to just mow and mow and mow and cut and cut and cut over and over? The answer is yes and no. If you only do one cutting and mowing a season, that does not help. If you really want to control and knock back the species, what you're doing is trying to knock its ability to photosynthesize by removing as much leafy material. So once the species gets about this high or whatever, knock it back. Then it comes again, knocks it back. Every time you do that, it starts to lose its momentum and starts to give up. So it's a lot of work, but it can be successful. And mechanical treatments. I don't know, upper right, if anybody's ever used a weed wrench on shrubs. Yeah, these are very effective, especially if there's just, not a ton of the individuals of the shrubs, but these are good ones that you can't pull by hand, but you can pull by the weed wrench, which is really helpful in some ways. And volunteers, it's easier for volunteers as well. And a lot of these species, a lot of the things that can handle this as well. It's usually the first looked at. You don't have to have chemicals. You don't have to have permits for that. It's just one of the options to look at when you're looking at an invasive plant project is to use the mechanical or manual pulling. They're usually labor site disturbance, so you have to take this into consideration. There's a lot of soil disturbance, which invasive species love. They love it. They love that. So the potential for invasive species to recur there is very likely. That's why you have to keep going at it and potentially even planting natives if natives aren't there, aren't coming back. Annual cutting is not good. Annual cutting does not do well. It'll present you with a situation that you will not be able to manage with infestation. So not a good thing to do. But these are I just talked about some of the disadvantages of manual and mechanical. There's no solution, but it's usually a good thing to do, especially if it's a small infestation of an invasive plant. Chemical treatments. A lot of people some people, well, it's very controversial, but if it's used safely, it is one of the more effective and resource efficient ways to treat invasive species infestations. You don't typically have that soil disturbance, creating that kind of environment. There's usually two herbicides, glyphosate, of course, and triclopyr with certain brands of herbicides that are used for these two. And they're typically the non-toxic organic compounds. And then when they become combined with other things, they become toxic to the plants. The triclopyr does not affect the monocots, so it will not treat lilies and grasses and species like that. But everything else is there. Surfactants and dyes are typically used, especially when you're doing a large, if you're going to do like cut and painting, which I'll talk about in just a second. It's good to use a dye so you'll know where you've been, so you won't walk over it and have herbicide on you. So it's extremely important to do that. And surfactants sometimes are used for anything you're going to apply to a leaf, because herbicides in general do not have the capability of being to the leaf. They can't apply to the leaf, so the surfactant helps that application stick to the plant. Foliar applications. So I do not recommend any spraying, large-scale spraying of foliar applications unless it's an extreme monoculture that's just absolutely out of control and there's no other way of treating the species. So anywhere where there's no non-target effects. So if there's a rare plant, there's a lot of native plants, there's a lot of wildlife nearby, don't do it. So not used in very sensitive sites, wetlands, or rivers. So this is one of the most popular. This is also one of the least detrimental or to the environment types of chemical treatments is cut and paint. So what the basically is you cut the shrub really low to the ground, and then you kind of paint it with a concentration of herbicide. So that one is it's very targeted, and it's not very there's very little danger to plants and other wildlife next to it. So if there's one method of chemical treatment, that would be the one I would use. And of course, it doesn't work on herbaceous plants for like garlic mustard and stuff, but it does work well on some of the larger shrubs. So it's also best and done in late summer because that's when the shrub start to look at its resources down in the ground, where in the spring, all of its energy is up in the leaves. So you kind of want to do it more in the summer to autumn. You can even do it late autumn if you want, because that's where the energy is. So that's just the cut stem treatments, different types of cut stem treatments. 25 to 30%, that's usually what you use for like a glyphosate percent, the cut. So you also, one thing is important for this, you don't want to cut for a whole day and then paint the next day. You need to treat the species really soon after you cut it. So that's an important aspect of this. So it does translocate the herbicide directly into the root, and it's very target specific. So it's pretty effective on all these types of large shrubs that we talked about: buckthorn, honeysuckle, any kind of barberry, even the burning bush. So lots of different types of invasive large shrubs. You can also do it on Phragmites. This was in Cambridge. Glove swipe. I'm not going to talk about this because people aren't going to do this. So it's really messy. This is where you take a hand and you swipe it with basically swipe it with herbicide on it, and you swipe the actual plant itself. So you get the herbicide on the leaves and you just swipe it. It's a lot of intense work. It's messy too, because, and you see these people here, they've got their Tyvek suits on. It's probably 90 degrees. Not fun. Not fun. With gloves, like 3 different layers of gloves, just not a fun type. What are the adverse effects? Yeah, well, there's definitely some potential adverse effects with chemical to the environment. So you really have to pay attention to this. Glyphosate is non-selective, so it'll kill any plant, basically. Damages all plants. Triclopyr is difficult. It's also very tough on your eyes. So be very, very careful if you're going to do that. Risk to human health. There's studies, of course, that have been done that show that there's some risk to that. And there it is, the human health effects. Some recent suggest that glyphosate may be an endocrine disruptor. Those are some studies that have been done. Other studies just don't show anything, any indication of long use. But you just have to be careful. The one thing you need to do is just go by the label. Be very, very cautious. Wear protective clothing, gloves, if you're gonna do the chemical treatment. Biological treatments, just quickly here. This is Galaricella beetles. I'm working on purple loosestrife. Very, very effective. And there's other treatments. These biological treatments are being studied currently for other species. I said mile a minute. There's weevils out there for that. I'll show a picture of that in a second. But some of these other species, some biological treatments are being studied for these. Japanese knotweed even. There's a psyllid that's starting to become pretty popular for that species. mile a minute. These weevils are kind of cute, actually. I think. I don't know. It's just me. I don't know. They're kind of. These are little guys, and they're used for mile a minute infestations. Um, Unfortunately, there's been mixed results, so we don't know how good they are at this point. But it is a potential method for control. And there's the Galaricella beetles that are on the stems and the leaves. They eat the stems and leaves. They knock it back. They don't kill and destroy the population, but they just knock it back enough till it doesn't become prevalent and dominant in the landscape. Smothering. We've had some quickly here. Smothering with plastic bags. Yeah, we've had some success of cutting common buckthorn in northern New Hampshire, and then covering it with black plastic all over, and leaving it there for about 13 months. Then uncovering it, it's dead. So you don't even use chemicals for that. You basically just cut it and smother it with black plastic. It has helped quite a bit. It's been 100% effective so far. So that's something I can, the thing is you have to cover as much as you can of the root. Burning can help, as I've already said. They kill non-woody plants that typically don't sprout, but burning is very resource intensive and requires a lot of permits. There's also lack of suitable window, qualified personnel. Sometimes only the hottest fires will kill the shrubs, so that's another thing to consider as well. Flame weeding, never done it. Actually, we did try it once in that garden in the woods. I don't think it was that effective. We tried it on a species, and I think it's okay. It might be okay for species that don't have deep roots to be able to do this, but flame weeding is unclear about its effectiveness. And grazing. Everybody likes goats and sheep. They're good for the public eye, but it does take a lot of management of these, a lot of resource. So, and all these other methods: flooding, organic treatment, smothering with large plastic bags. That's another potential method here as well. So I'm going to finish just with some. I promised that I would not end on a doom and gloom note, so I thought I would share some native perennials and shrubs to plant. Tyrella is a beautiful plant to plant for your native garden. It's also pretty. It can occur on different types of forests, wetlands, swamps, so it likes the moistness, so don't plant it in dry, sandy habitat. It's also fairly deer resistant, so it's good too. New England aster, always a beautiful plant to have in your garden as well. So New York aster is the cousin. I don't know if it has a New York accent. It's like the different New England accent, but it's a more of a wetland types plant. This New York aster. So serviceberry, very beautiful flowers, and this is just one species of serviceberry. There's several that you can plant in your garden. Edible fruits. There's a rare one as well. A couple rare ones in New England as well. The beautiful borealis. This mostly occurs more in the central western New England, in some of the more cool, moist hemlock forests. But a beautiful addition to your native garden. Blue cohosh, a beautiful, also spring ephemeral wildflower, and it has these really spherical blue fruits. Rich floodplain forests and rich upland forests as well. Milkweed, and of course the beautiful orange butterfly milkweed, which is I love to see here in Cape Cod. Extremely important for the pollinators. If you want a shrub cover, a really low shrub cover that's very good. Bearberry is a really good one. It can help with erosion and stuff. So, and sheep laurel, beautiful pink flower. It's the cousin of the Kalmia latifolia, which is the mountain laurel, but a much smaller version of it. It's also adaptable as well, so it can handle it can handle dry, it can handle wet. It just likes acidity, so it likes the acidic conditions. The nanny berries, some of the nanny berries, the viburnums are also very good for growth, good for pollinators as well. This one is sweet fern. This one occurs all over the Cape and the islands. It does great by fixating nitrogen to a depauperate or very poor soil. So it's very good for that. And it also has a really nice scent. And chokeberry, very beautiful plant, shrub in the summer. It has these really pretty plants. Not very edible though. Spotted Joe Pye weed, a beautiful wet meadow plant to use, and wild bergamot, very popular plant to use in your garden as well. Golden Alexanders, also really nice to use, very attractive to many types of native pollinators, including insects like bees, wasps, flies, and beetles. And the very popular cardinal flower, Lobelia cardinalis, which loves moisture. This one occurs on the Cape and Vineyard. This is yellow wild indigo. Also a host for a very rare butterfly, the frosted elfin. So very good plant to have. And that's it. I went over, I think. But